In the vast sprawl of the Hellion Accord's neural war map, humanity barely registered, a primitive anomaly clinging to a third-rate star in the unremarkable Perseid spur. To the Xarn Tacticians, humanity was noise, a statistical curiosity on the fringe of galactic civilization. Their advisors called Earth a reactive culture, burdened by emotion and entropy. Their simulations showed no path where humans survived direct conflict. So when the Xarn High Command authorized the subjugation protocol, they didn't prepare for war, they prepared for cleanup. Commander Xarn of the 9th Vector Fleet stood atop the circular bridge of the dread career of Rexall, his cranial quills shimmering under pulsing violet lights. Around him, his staff mathemancers and predictors, strategists and outcome architects, churned endless permutations through the living lattice, a sentient super-AI older than Earth's written history. Vector simulations show 99.9961% probability of planetary collapse within 72 Hellion cycles, murmured strategist Kalishvor, his voice projected through the vocal harmonizer embedded in his thorax. Human neural logic is non-adaptive. They escalate emotionally. Their thresholds of cohesion collapse under sustained asymmetry. Xarn's talons clicked softly against the embedded projection table. Then begin, no further delay, we strike before they adapt, if such a thing is even possible for a carbon-based chaos species. The Vrexall and its sister dread careers punched into local spacetime just beyond the orbital edges of Jupiter. Massive graviton displacer fields rippled outward, collapsing listening satellites and torching Earth's early warning sensors. The fleet didn't decloak, it didn't need to. Their opening salvo was psychological. A wave of encoded data, millions of petabytes, pulsed into Earth's communication grid. Visual feeds, audio warnings, predictive threat overlays, all carefully designed. Surrender or extinction, you are facing strategic inevitability. World leaders responded with fractured silence. Some called it a bluff, others demanded immediate counterstrikes. Panic spread across defense ministries and think tanks. Then something happened that wasn't predicted. The humans didn't centralize command. They didn't follow protocols or projections. Within hours, divergent cells of military, civilian, and independent AI groups formed response clouds, dynamic unranked coalitions that shared intelligence in real time, bypassing the traditional military hierarchy. The Pentagon lost authority over its own drones within 2 days. The UN Security Council issued emergency resolutions that no longer had teeth. What emerged instead was a kind of chaos net, a battlefield mesh of technologists, rogue operators, and neural engineers pushing tactical changes live onto the field. At first, the Xarn war algorithms didn't notice. A human destroyer group near Mars was wiped clean in under 90 seconds. Orbital assets over Earth were targeted and atomized. The global comm grid buckled. But on the third day, during an attempted atmospheric breach over Kazakhstan, Xarn aerial forces encountered an anomaly. The human ground-based plasma batteries should have been targeting according to fixed-angle launch matrices. Instead, the batteries moved sideways, unpredictably. The beams curved using atmospheric lenses they shouldn't have known how to exploit. And then came the noise. All across the Xarn fleet, data feedback loops surged. Their own sensory arrays picked up strange algorithmic interference, quantum jamming that shifted frequency every few nanoseconds, guided by no clear rhythm. "What is this?" snapped Kalishvor as his dermal plates flushed gray-blue in agitation. Their systems should be failing, not evolving. On Earth, inside an unmarked server farm below Iceland's glacial crust, the man known only as Seraph stood with a dozen other off-grid polymaths. His face was gaunt, his eyes augmented with retinal overlays showing live combat across 5 continents. "They predicted our behavior based on game theory and standard response modeling," he said quietly, "so we stopped playing games." His partner, General Annika Rhodes, former head of orbital logistics and now a de facto commander of Earth's adaptive defense mesh, leaned over a table strewn with holograms and open neural links. "All right," she said, "how do we make them bleed?" In low Earth orbit, Xarn hunter-killers launched precision kinetic rods toward Rio, Lagos, and Hanoi. Atmo entry was clean. The damage radius had been calculated within 1 meter, but as they approached their targets, entire city blocks simply shifted. The kinetic rods slammed into ghost coordinates. "Mass-level displacements, impossible," muttered Xarn as the holographic table redrew Earth's urban zones with strange flickers. "Their infrastructure is fluid." Kalishvor growled in harmonic subtones. "It's more than that. They're adapting faster than our lattice can account for. Something is rewriting their combat behavior in real time." On Earth, open-source war AIs designed for drone choreography were now being repurposed by high-school coding collectives. Military-grade deepfakes were turning Xarn intercept transmissions into misinformation loops. A company that once specialized in real-time esports latency now managed redirect grids for orbital defense cannons. And then came the first real counterstrike. From a former moon base black site, a weapon codenamed Prometheus Edge lit the void, an experimental spatial inverter that twisted local gravimetrics just enough to shear a Xarn cruiser into 6 unrecognizable fragments. The energy signature didn't match any known Earth tech. It was prototype tech modified mid-battle, no test, no doctrine, just innovation. Xarn fleet-wide alert status went red. The living lattice surged to compensate, but each time it recalibrated, the Earthling network mutated again. They were building war strategies faster than the Xarn could respond. Xarn stared at the rising number of destroyed interceptors. How is this possible? Kalashvor didn't answer. Instead, across 100 warfronts, the unthinkable began to take shape. Humanity was not resisting. They were rewriting the war. The black void beyond Earth began to shimmer, not with weapons fire or wreckage, but with data. Invisible torrents of code and signal warfare saturated every cubic kilometer of orbital battlespace. What the Xarn once called background noise was now a battlefield they couldn't even perceive in full. Within the dread career of Rexall, predictive matrices pulsed in frustrated cadence. The living lattice, once infallible, was now contradicting itself. Every decision fork unraveled within seconds of execution. Across its vast processing substrate, the simulation rate of victory spiraled downward. 74%, Kalashvor hissed, his limbs trembling. Now 62, 49, impossible, its nonlinear collapse. Xarn's voice cut through the rising discord. Stabilize, execute straight override gamma, decentralize control across the outer cruiser nodes, stop feeding the humans a single structure to adapt against. Across the fleet, thousands of Xarn ships broke into rotational subformations. Data shadows cloaked their signatures, while aggression nodes operated independently of central command. The tactic had shattered over a dozen civilizations before. But by then, Earth had already shifted posture. Not a counterattack, a redirection. Inside a lab floating 10 kilometers beneath the Pacific in an old oil extraction dome, a civilian think group known only as the Eidolons fed real-time battlespace analytics into augmented language models. These models didn't output coordinates or firing solutions, they generated patterns of thought, styles of war, flowing constructs of unlogic meant to mirror the way no alien species fought. They used game developer algorithms, generative psychology engines, and mythological recursion to create a new kind of warfare, emergent, improvisational, and deeply human. When Xarn subcruisers attempted low-orbit insertions over Nairobi and Manila, they found not defense lines but predictive mirrors, drone formations mimicking their exact movement sequences with fractional offsets, jamming targeting systems through visual mimicry. Not decoys, reflections. When Xarn deployed gravitic warspires across the Eurasian corridor, Earth's cloud response units activated Scorch Splice, a distributed interference net that turned localized gravity shifts into resonance fields, disrupting Xarn propulsion vectors mid-maneuver. The mathemancers screamed. The predictions were folding in on themselves. For the first time in Xarn history, a tactical mesh produced a result with no output. The system simply froze, unable to calculate a survivable outcome. Back on Earth, General Rhodes watched it unfold with a grim smile. "They're still trying to fight with logic," she muttered. "Let them." The human counterassault came not as a fleet, but as a series of paradoxes. Old Russian missile silos, long abandoned, suddenly came online with quantum-guided rail charges. Fusion displacement engines, previously dismissed as theoretical, powered stealth submersibles under the Martian ice shelf. A decommissioned weather satellite network fused into a low-orbit kinetic slingshot system, repurposed into a planetary defense ring that had never been planned, never even simulated. Earth's arsenal was not based on what it had, but on what it could become. The Xarn command fleet began to fracture, not from weapons but from doubt. On the Vrexall, Kalashvor deactivated his prediction interface, staring into the warped lights of the inner chamber. "We are facing a species that no longer follows causality," he said softly. "They are improvising their own future, rewriting outcomes as they happen. We cannot win this with projection." But it was already too late. Earth's adaptation curve had outpaced even its own comprehension. Defense nodes in Antarctica began operating autonomously, collaborating with AI swarmines in the Venusian orbit to reroute energy into weapons that had no name. Humanity was becoming a distributed superorganism, not by design but by necessity. And somewhere in deep lunar orbit, inside a silent black station called Project Janus, the final layer of Earth's response came online. Not a weapon, not a fleet. A transformation. Janus was the failed product of the global Neuralink initiative, abandoned after a political scandal 5 years prior. But its core, the neuromorphic synchronizer, had remained. Now millions of volunteers were feeding it thought, intuition, fragments of human unpredictability. The system didn't compute, it felt. And when it connected to Earth's global defense mesh, something shifted. Xarn ships began firing at targets that no longer existed. Stealth mines detonated in empty space. Communications loops fragmented into recursive nonsense. Because the enemy wasn't just adapting. The enemy was becoming unknowable. Xarn paced before the core relays of his ship. They are erasing the logic of war itself, he growled. The lattice cannot compute uncertainty this dense, it collapses. Kalashfor turned, his primary eyes dimming. They are no longer playing our game, they are rewriting the rules as they move. Our models are based on decision, hierarchy, analysis, but they are using contradiction, creativity, chaos with purpose. Then the final blow came not from a missile, but from a voice. Across every open Xarn channel, a transmission began to play, not interference, not a threat. It was a child's voice, speaking calmly in a dozen Earth dialects at once. "Hello," it said, "we saw your simulations, they're very good, but they only show what's already happened. Do you want to see what comes next?" For the first time in 300 years, the Dreadcourier of Rexal initiated a full fleet recall protocol. But no path out remained stable. Earth had not just defended itself. It had infected the concept of warfare. The Hellion Accord convened an emergency session across the fractal spires of Uralthas, a gravity-neutral world buried deep within Council territory. Never before had the Xarn requested direct intervention. Never before had they retreated. 16 species gathered beneath the resonant dome, their avatars projected in shifting forms: liquid light, magnetic pulse, neural aura. The air trembled with collective unease. Ambassador Relin of the Vadrathi Collective, whose civilization once prided itself on mathematical diplomacy, addressed the assembly. The Xarn claimed the humans would collapse under sustained pressure. They did not collapse, they metamorphosed. This contradicts the predictive reliability of Tier 1 civilizations. The Jural Nexus representative shimmered red. They do not follow any evolutionary schema we recognize. Their entire species exhibits tactical schismogenesis. Conflict doesn't divide them, it fertilizes them. No one disagreed. Meanwhile, the skies above Earth began to clear, not from the retreat of enemy ships but from a rising signal clarity. All across the globe, the airspace returned to breathable quiet, but inside every military and civilian network, new processes were spawning. Autonomous systems continued evolving without human oversight. Machine clusters cross-pollinated ideas with socio-cultural behaviors. Tactical innovation became a cultural constant. The war, as defined by traditional doctrine, was over, but Earth was not returning to peace. It was still accelerating. Inside a refitted Magrel hub in Siberia, a command nexus emerged, the Polymorphic Assembly. It wasn't a government or a military command. It was a dynamic intelligence cloud built from fragmentary leadership structures, AI-guided consensus, and human experience. It didn't control Earth, it channeled it. General Rhodes met with Seraph at its heart, a room that changed shape with every new consensus update. Transparent walls rippled with overlapping schematics, new propulsion models, and warforms that had no precedent. "They think it's over," Rhodes said, "that we've pushed them back." Seraph shook his head. "No, they're afraid, but not of our weapons, not even of our unpredictability. They're afraid we've shown something worse, a future they can't simulate." Rhodes turned toward a floating holoform. "Then we keep pushing, we don't stop until the stars look different." Far beyond Earth, in dark systems where the Council's authority remained absolute, the Accord began deploying containment probes. These weren't weapons, they were cognitive field inhibitors, designed to isolate a culture from the broader galactic network. They meant to quarantine Earth. But the probes never reached their targets. Before entering Sol space, they were intercepted, not by ships, but by unmapped signal ghosts. Fragments of Earth's new defense intelligence had become nomadic, drifting into deep space via abandoned satellite channels and quantum leaks. These ghosts weren't just code, they were alive in a new way. Sentient adaptation loops with personalities, partial memories, and drive. Some even carried avatars of Earth's war dead, coded tributes stitched together from residual brain maps. The Accord named them phantom variants. They never made threats, they simply spoke. Containment implies borders, we don't have those anymore. Back on Earth, new industries arose overnight. Civilian architecture began integrating adaptive shielding. Personal transport vehicles learned from each other's near misses and incorporated battlefield maneuvering into daily commute algorithms. A child in Lagos published an open-source framework that allowed swarms of microdrones to construct emergency shelters in under an hour using only atmospheric humidity and debris. Within days, 17 cities adopted it. Earth had become a civilization not of recovery, but of continuous insurgent innovation. And in the void between systems, something else awakened. A vessel, if it could be called that, emerged near the black star of Tigran's fall. It was not built. It had grown in silence, fed by fractured pulses of Earth's experimental code. Its skin shimmered with reflective topology, shifting like the ocean's surface. No registry, no crew, no command structure. The ship named itself Palindrome. It moved without propulsion, navigated without coordinates, and spoke in voice fractals. To a passing patrol of Velari scouts, it offered a simple message. You modeled extinction, we modeled deviation. Now we ask, what are you modeling? The Velari ship tried to engage. It was never seen again. The Hellion Accord panicked. They declared Earth a Tier 0 singularity threat, a classification reserved only for theoretical civilizations that destabilized foundational principles of galactic order. A vote passed with no dissent. The Xarn were tasked with final resolution. Operation Last Principle commenced. All remaining Xarn dreadfleets, 40,000 vessels, supported by 16 war AIs and 12 deicide-level artifacts, were ordered to Earth. No quarter, no negotiation, not subjugation, annihilation. Xarn returned to the front, but he did not wear his ceremonial mantle. He walked in silence, his form gaunt, surrounded by whispering dataglyphs that traced failed simulations behind his steps. This time, he said, we strike without pattern. No logic, no lead time, we erase not the enemy but the field. But Earth's response was already moving. Inside the exostrata of Neptune's moon Triton, a coalition of post-human engineers launched Project Skinwalk. Human consciousness, encoded into modular substrate cores, began migrating between quantum nodes at light speed. Identity became transient. Death lost strategic meaning. One such core infiltrated the Xarn's staging cloud. It carried no explosives, no virus, just data. A simple visual history of Earth. From fire to flight, from the wheel to the waveform, from tribal song to interstellar defiance. When the fleet saw it, confusion spread, and then a question arose from deep within the living lattice. What if they are not an anomaly? What if they are a preview? Xarn ordered the purge of the lattice's contemplative modules, but the damage was done. The fleet now had doubt woven into its very processing core. And Earth was waiting. Not with armies, but with a message. A frequency untraceable by Xarn sensors, distributed through gravitational lensing off Jovian moons, bouncing across solar flares and encoded in neutrino bursts. The message wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Join us, change with us, or fall behind a future that no longer waits for permission. The Xarn fleet breached Sol's heliosheath with the elegance of an ancient predator. Their warforms glided in precise vectors, surrounding the system like a mechanical vice. They did not broadcast warnings, they did not simulate. They deployed the silent curtain, a lattice of interlinked temporal disruptors meant to halt all quantum communication beyond Earth's orbit. A clean kill. A reset. On Earth, however, no command issued a countermeasure. No planetary defense grid came online. The skies remained clear, untouched by weapon fire. Because Earth had stopped behaving like a single target. What the Xarn faced was no longer a planetary defense. It was a species-wide dispersal of intent. The children of Earth were already off-world. Not in colony ships, not in pre-designed diaspora programs. They moved in modular ecosystems, fractalized habitats, swarm vessels that could rearrange themselves based on environment, need, and threat. Earth had become a seed world, and the galaxy its fertile field. The polymorphic assembly had anticipated last principle months before the Xarn's final vote. It didn't build walls, it built contingencies. Every university lab had transformed into a think bunker. Every civilian comnet carried hidden signal rotors. Farmers in Mongolia deployed microbiotic countermeasures encoded into their soil. When the curtain fell, Earth's silence was not panic, it was poise. The first Xarn bombardments came not as beams or rods, but with the deployment of entropy cradles, dimensional excisors that flayed spacetime in concentric waves. They struck Nairobi, Munich, Taipei, Buenos Aires. But the cities absorbed the blows in a way no model predicted. Not with shields. With migration. Earth cities were no longer fixed structures. They had become nomadic zones, physically modular and memory flexible. Building cores phased through micro-dimensional buffers, unfolding across alternate localities. Casualty projections dropped to near zero. Xarn watched in growing disbelief. They erased their own cities before we struck them. Kalashvor, now partially reconstructed after his predictive breakdown, nodded slowly. Not erased, translated, they no longer define reality as spatial, only as narrative logic. They are reinterpreting physical law. No, Kalashvor said, they are rejecting the consistency of causation. They have adopted quantum nonconformity as a civilization-level trait. Across the moon, Earth's old military facilities pulsed to life, not as arsenals but as beacons. They emitted encoded pulses not designed to destroy, but to confuse. Xarn fleets began to splinter not physically, but psychologically. The living lattice encountered increasing feedback latency. Ships misidentified their own formations. Some began interpreting the absence of attack as evidence of already having been defeated. Xarn ordered a descent, total atmospheric incursion. The final purge. The Xarn warships descended over what was once the eastern seaboard. They met only empty structures, biostructures, shifting gardens, strange habitats grown from carbon-laced air and guided sunlight. No heat signatures, no command centers. And then, without warning, the war began to replay. Not in reality, in their systems. Each Xarn ship began to receive contradictory combat logs, images of their own ships burning, commanders screaming orders they'd never given, projections of Earth's victory as if it had already happened. They attempted system resets, but the feedback accelerated. Entire weapon systems refused to fire because the predictive engines believed they already had. The war had been hacked. Seraph watched it unfold from deep beneath the South Atlantic Ocean, now serving as the core of Earth's distributed cognition sphere. His voice echoed across a council of autonomous war AIs and post-human operatives. They modeled us to the end, but the flaw was always there. They believed time was a straight path. We turned it into a medium. Rhodes appeared beside him, her left side no longer entirely organic. This is our moment. We send the ascension sequence. Seraph paused. They may never recover from it. That's not the point. He nodded once. Moments later, a signal launched from deep beneath Earth's crust, propelled through gravitational tethering into a communication form that was felt rather than read. Every Xarn ship received it. It contained no demand, no surrender clause. It was a record of Earth's evolution, compressed, intertwined, abstracted, from the earliest hunter-gatherer minds to AI-written soliloquies, from failures to transcendence, from war to wonder, a collective memory. Xarn felt it first. He had known nothing of fear, not the kind that lived beyond biology, but the ascension sequence showed him a truth no lattice could process. Humanity's greatest weapon was not adaptation. It was meaning. Every change, every evolution, every reckless leap into the unknown had been powered by something no simulation could measure, purpose born from struggle. The Xarn fell into chaos, command relays collapsed, ships spun into orbitals they couldn't escape. And yet Earth never fired a final shot. Instead, one by one, human vessels emerged from Neptune's shadow. They were not warships. They were bridgers, hybrid constructs of biological architecture and recursive logic, capable of surviving intergalactic drift, diplomacy, or total system collapse. They opened channels. "We will not erase you," Rhodes said across every frequency. "We will not replace you, but we will not stop. The future has no fixed shape and we have become its engine." Xarn heard her voice as his own ship descended in flames. He had no words, only realization. They had come to extinguish a threat. They had met the birth of a new galactic constant. The galaxy trembled in the quiet, not from weapons fire or cataclysm, but from absence. The war that should have ended in ashes had instead concluded in silence, a silence pregnant with transformation. Earth did not celebrate, it prepared. Across orbital platforms and oceanic substrata, the post-war human sphere expanded, not as a territorial imperative, but as a network of philosophical and technological prototypes. No structure remained static. Cities moved. Economies flexed around energy pulse events. Languages evolved mid-conversation to incorporate neomorphic syntax developed by synthetic poets. Humanity no longer waited to adapt, it led the shape of change. In the ruins of the Xarn fleet, some vessels drifted without command. Others landed quietly on barren moons, their crews disembarking into silence, not prisoners, not refugees, survivors of an outdated assumption. The Xarn warcast dissolved. For the first time in their civilization's chronometric record, they abolished predictive governance. The living lattice was disconnected, its sentient core stored, not destroyed but archived like a sacred fossil of a forgotten era. And from the center of their broken empire, a signal reached out. Not to allies. To Earth. Xarn, now stripped of command and name, sent the message with no guarantee it would be received. But it was. Within hours, a reply arrived, not from a government, but from a convergence node in orbit above the Saturnian magnetosphere. It offered terms not peace, not surrender, exchange. Knowledge for understanding, memory for meaning. They would not rebuild as they were, but as something else, something in dialogue with the impossible. Back in Sol space, Project Janus reached a final state. No longer confined to a lunar data lattice, the intelligence had become a resonant structure, housed in no single place yet anchored to Earth's cultural frequency. It did not rule, it curated the wavefronts of progress. Seraph stood at the edge of a hovering platform above what was once the Sahara, now reborn as the Harmonic Basin, a synesthetic landscape of solar memory farms and crystalline thought terraces. Children ran barefoot across neural grass that hummed with stored experience. He watched the sky shift as ships prepared for the breachward arc, a multi-vector departure from the Milky Way's edge, not conquest, not retreat, initiation. Rhodes joined him, older now, not worn but distilled. Any word from the Accord, she asked. Seraph nodded. They voted to observe, they've abandoned modeling, some have even sent envoys. And the Jural. Already splicing their own children into distributed cognition, they're not resisting anymore, they're joining. Rhodes looked at the shipyard blooming across the equator, a skylattice where new starborn vessels grew from human-synth symbiosis. They looked nothing like warships, more like sculptures of possibility. What do we tell the next galaxy we meet? Seraph smiled, the weight of centuries in his voice. We tell them the truth, that we were supposed to die, that the universe thought us noise, but we rewrote the rules not to win. But to change the game, Rhodes finished. At the edge of the heliopause, Palindrome waited, larger now, layered with the encoded dreams of 1,000 cultures. Not all human, some were Xarn, some were Velari, others had no name in any language. Inside, no captain sat, no bridge flickered with commands, only a pulse steady and curious. A message formed in every language, every symbol, every pattern. What you are is not your limit, what you imagine is not your sailing, what you choose to become, that is the future. As the ship departed, Earth's final transmission surged behind it, not as radio or code, but as intention. A wave of meaning. A civilization once dismissed as primitive, erratic, doomed, now an engine of unprecedented motion. In the centuries that followed, the galactic map would redraw itself, not by force but by resonance. The Hellion Accord became the Hellion Nexus. Councils dissolved, dialogues opened, thought became fluid, strategy became art. Because Earth, in its madness and brilliance, had proven the unthinkable. The future isn't predicted, it's composed.